A fourth grader's guide to surviving the after-school program by the fourth graders in the after-school program at Charles R. Drew Charter School. Hi, my name is Kennedy. I'm 9 years old and in the fourth grade. It's the end of a long school day. Kennedy sits patiently at her desk as Brooklyn calls Kennedy from behind and says, "Hey Kennedy, what are you doing after school?" Kennedy looks at the clock and says, "Every day I go to the after-school program." Brooklyn's smile slowly fades away. The after-school program? Why would you want to do that? Kennedy smiles and says, "Both my parents work late, so I kinda have to stay." Brooklyn gives Kennedy a strange look and says, "You do? My mom always picks me up at the end of the school day, but maybe my mom will let me stay in the after-school program sometime." Kennedy shrugs and says, "Yeah, maybe." Suddenly, someone knocks on the classroom door. The teacher opens the door and is given a note. "Brooklyn," the teacher calls, "today you are to stay in after school." Brooklyn frowns. "After school? But why?" Kennedy smiles at Brooklyn and says, "Oh, you're going to have a great time." Mr. Chris quickly comes to Brooklyn and Kennedy's classroom to gather all the students in the fourth grade after-school program. Brooklyn stares at Kennedy and says, "I really don't know about this." Kennedy grabs her book bag and says, "It's really not as bad as people make it seem. Come on, I'll tell you how I survived the after-school program." "So, you're gonna tell me how to survive the after-school program?" Brooklyn asks. Kennedy nods. Brooklyn grabs her book bag and slowly says, "Okay." The two girls walk out into the hallway, where several kids from the after-school program run and yell. Brooklyn glances at the fourth grade after-school students. "Wow, do the kids always act like this?" she asks. Kennedy nods and slowly says, "Yes, most of the time. And just like during the school day, you should always be quiet in the hallways and walk on the gray." "Look at these two in line," Mr. Chris says about Kennedy and Brooklyn. "Such a great example." Several fourth grade after-school students quiet down and stand straight in the line. The students then follow Mr. Chris down the hall and towards a classroom. Kennedy whispers in Brooklyn's ear, "That's the second key to surviving the after-school program. Always be sure to make good with the teachers." Brooklyn gives Kennedy the thumbs up. As Kennedy and Brooklyn put their book bags into a desk, several fourth grade after-school students run into the classroom. "Hurry up, guys, if you want to go outside," Mr. Chris yells. Several of the students linger inside the classroom. Kennedy and Brooklyn put their book bags into a desk and walk back into the hallway. "I guess you all don't want to go outside today," Mr. Chris yells. Several kids swiftly run out of the classroom. "Good job, guys. It really does look like you all want to go outside today," Mr. Chris says. All the kids cheer as they walk down the steps and into the playground. The fourth grade after-school students run into the playground. Shortly thereafter, a whistle is blown. "Fourth grade!" Mr. Chris yells. "It's time to go inside." "Wow, that was fast," Brooklyn says. Kennedy nods. "Well, that's because we have to go in and get our snack from the cafeteria." "Come on," Kennedy says. "Let's get ready to get our snack." Kennedy and Brooklyn run towards the door as several kids linger behind and try to get a few more minutes of recess. Kennedy and Brooklyn both look over at Mr. Chris, who doesn't look too happy. Brooklyn turns to Kennedy and says, "Let me guess. The next key is to always follow directions." Kennedy smiles and says, "You're right, especially if you want to do something fun with the after-school program teachers." Some of the fourth graders run inside of the school talking loudly. Mr. Chris pauses and says, "Guys, you need to quiet down." A few of the fourth graders continue talking. Mr. Chris pauses in the hallway and stares at the students. Kennedy turns to Brooklyn and whispers, "That's the next key to surviving the after-school program. Not only should you walk through the hallway quietly, but also when you're walking throughout the school too. And be sure not to run." The fourth grade after-school students run into the cafeteria, grab their snacks, and eat. A few minutes later, Mr. Chris yells, "Okay, guys, it's time to go back upstairs." Brooklyn has a confused look on her face. "What's wrong?" Kennedy asks. "Well," Brooklyn begins, "we just got our snack." Kennedy laughs. "Yeah, things do go pretty fast during the after-school." Brooklyn and Kennedy stand, pick up their trash, and tosses it into the trash can. "Hey guys," Mr. Chris yells. "You all need to be sure to pick up your trash." Some of the fourth grade after-school students groan. Kennedy turns to Brooklyn and says, "Good thing we picked up our trash." Brooklyn nods. "Is that another key to surviving the after-school program?" Kennedy smiles as several boys at the end of the line pick up the trash from the floor. As the fourth graders leave from the cafeteria, some of the first graders enter. While in the hallway, several names are called on the walkie-talkie. But Mr. Chris cannot make out what is said. He pauses and says, "Guys, this is getting pretty old. You all have been in school almost 3 months now, and you still don't understand that we cannot hear on the walkie." The fourth graders quickly quiet down. Kennedy turns to Brooklyn and says, "Not only do you have to be quiet in the hallway, but you also have to be sure that the after-school teachers can hear their walkie in order for us to be dismissed." Brooklyn smiles and says, "Yeah, that makes sense. I've heard many names called several times because the after-school teachers cannot hear them." Kennedy smiles and says, "Yeah, that's because we're loud in the hallways." The girls look at each other and laugh. "Allison and Zelda, peace out," Mr. Chris yells. Both Allison and Zelda leave and gather their belongings. "Wow, they leave early," Brooklyn says. "Yeah, some kids do leave early," Kennedy begins. "My dad came kind of early yesterday because I had a soccer game and missed my new enrichment class." The girls laugh and walk up the steps to head to their classroom for the afternoon. The fourth grade after-school students continue to walk up the steps, down the hallway, and into their assigned after-school classes. Brooklyn goes into Miss McGee's class with Kennedy and completes her homework. After Brooklyn completes her homework, she and Kennedy play one of Miss McGee's board games. "Kennedy," Miss McGee yells, "it's time for you to go." Kennedy frowns and says, "Aw, man, I sure hope the keys I gave you helped you to survive the after-school program today." Brooklyn smiles at Kennedy and says, "Well, it sure does look like I did." The girls both laugh. Kennedy grabs her book bag and walks towards the classroom door. Brooklyn runs over to Kennedy and says, "Thank you so much for giving me the keys to surviving the after-school program. I sure hope both my parents work late again so I can stay another time." The two girls wave and Kennedy exits the classroom. Moments later, Brooklyn's name is called. She grabs her belongings and says her goodbyes to Miss McGee and the other students. Here are the keys to surviving the after-school program. Walk quietly in the hallway and be sure to walk on the gray. Always follow directions. Be sure to make good with the after-school teachers. Not only should you walk through the hallway quietly, but also when walking throughout the school too. And be sure not to run. Be sure to pick up your trash after you eat your snack. Talk quietly to the after-school program teachers so the after-school teachers can hear your name when it's called on the walkie-talkie. And most of all, have fun. The end.